The sun was a hammer of brass upon the clay-baked earth of the Mitanni marches, a desolate frontier where the Babylonian sphere of influence met the shadow of Egypt. Naram-Sin, commander of the Gilgamesh garrison, felt the heat not just on his helmet, but pressed deep into his very soul. His lineage was one of law and order. His father had been a royal scribe, dedicated to inscribing and upholding the very code of Hammurabi. Naram-Sin had chosen the soldier's path, yet the discipline he maintained was carved from the same cuneiform tablets. He believed in the kanunu, the law, swift, brutal, and unyielding. Justice was a straight line, incapable of being curved by circumstance. His small garrison was a critical choke point, a muddy, desperate outpost guarding the Euphrates supply route against marauding desert tribes and Egyptian scouts. For 3 days their watch had been tense. The air crackled with the expectation of conflict, like dry tinder waiting for a spark. His second-in-command, Shalmaneser, a man whose loyalty was matched only by his adherence to tradition, paced the watchtower with silent impatience. Commander Shalmaneser finally grated, his eyes narrowed against the glare. The skirmish is coming. Our scouts are restless. Naram-Sin merely adjusted the leather straps of his bronze scale armor. Let them come, Shalmaneser. We are Babylon. We are the law. The skirmish erupted not with a roar, but with a sudden, vicious flurry of arrows launched from the scrubland beyond the fort's perimeter. The attackers were a Praru, skilled desert raiders, but their formation suggested they were guided, perhaps by a more experienced foreign hand. Naram-Sin bellowed his commands, deploying his archers to suppress the arrows while sending a small, disciplined wedge of spearmen out to flank the raiders. The fight was quick and bloody. The Babylonians were hardened veterans, their bronze weapons efficiently carving through the lightly armored tribesmen. Naram-Sin himself moved with the grace of a trained killer, his curved harp sword ending 3 lives in as many heartbeats. The raiders broke, melting back into the desert, leaving only their dead and a single valuable prize behind. Near a clump of dying tamarisk trees lay a man dressed not in the coarse cloth of a tribesman, but in the white linen of an Egyptian officer. He was bleeding from a shallow wound on his hip, but was clearly conscious, his dark eyes radiating defiance. His name, they learned later from the papers on his person, was Khonsu, a respected tactician from the court of the pharaoh. A spy, Shalmaneser spat, driving the officer to his knees. A high-value snake. We have caught him near our water supply. The code is clear. Naram-Sin knelt, ignoring the dust and the heat, studying Khonsu's face. The Egyptian was well-fed and carried himself with aristocratic pride. You are far from the Nile, Officer Naram-Sin, stated in flawless Egyptian, hoping to provoke a reaction. Khonsu said nothing, his lips pressed into a thin, scornful line, refusing even the briefest glance of recognition. Naram-Sin glanced at his lieutenant, cleanse his wounds and bring him to the main interrogation cell. He may know the larger plan. Shalmaneser's face tightened. Commander, the code. Tablet 3. Clause 5. He who is found marking the path for our enemies shall be struck down immediately. There is no questioning. He is a commander, not a common scout, Naram-Sin countered, wiping blood from his sword. His intelligence is worth more than his death. The law is the law, Shalmaneser insisted, his voice hardening with fear of cosmic transgression. To delay justice is to invite the wrath of Shamash. The dilemma was immediate and agonizing, thrust upon Naram-Sin under the relentless Mesopotamian sun. If he followed the code, he honored his father, the law of his land, and the sanctity of their military discipline. But if he followed the law, he risked marching his entire garrison blindly into a massive Egyptian counterattack that Khonsu could reveal. Naram-Sin ordered Khonsu confined but not executed, earning a glare of cold, disciplined fury from Shalmaneser. The interrogation began swiftly in the dark, cool mud brick cellar, lit only by a sputtering oil lamp. Naram-Sin showed Khonsu the captured maps, the familiar lines of the desert routes that led to the heart of the Babylonian-controlled territory. Your mission was to confirm our strength and readiness, Naram-Sin observed. What your true purpose lies beyond this skirmish, does it not? Khonsu remained silent, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, refusing to acknowledge his captor. Naram-Sin pushed a clay tablet across the table, one that detailed the penalty for espionage. This is the Kanun. It predates your pharaohs. Its justice is simple. Your life is forfeit. Yet here you sit, Khonsu finally murmured, his voice hoarse, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. The Babylonians have lost their conviction. We have lost nothing, Naram-Sin snapped, anger finally breaking through his professionalism. Ah, we seek wisdom before we spill blood. Wisdom is useless when the law requires blindness, Khonsu replied, the smile widening into outright mockery. The exchange was a psychological duel, Naram-Sin trying to find the crack in the Egyptian's composure. He knew the Egyptian was expecting physical torment, but Naram-Sin refused to resort to base barbarism. The code was about swift, clear punishment, not prolonged suffering. Suddenly, a breathless scout burst into the cellar, covered in dust and sweat, his eyes wide with urgency. Commander, a large force. Egyptian standards, chariots. They are moving fast, aiming to flank us at the narrow gorge. The gorge was their most vulnerable point, the only way to quickly access the supply road further inland. If the Egyptians took the gorge, the Gilgamesh garrison would be cut off and starved into submission. Naram-Sin's gaze snapped from the scout to Khonsu the reality of the situation, slamming into him like a bronze shield. Khonsu had been buying time. His silence was a weapon, confirming the severity and imminence of the threat. The code, Commander. Shalmaneser roared from the doorway, having followed the scout. Execute him now, and focus on the battle. The code demanded death. The code was designed to prevent the very distraction this prisoner represented. But the lives of 50 Babylonian soldiers hung on the knowledge trapped behind Khonsu's defiant eyes. Naram-Sin was paralyzed, two unbreakable forces tearing at his command, the law of his fathers and the duty to his men. He remembered sitting as a boy beneath the carved stele of Hammurabi, his father pointing to the solemn figure of the king. Look, my son. The king receives the law from the God of justice. The law is divine. Do not corrupt the divine order. But what was divine order in this arid landscape, if not the preservation of the life that upholds the law? If his men died because he obeyed the law too strictly, the code itself would be rendered meaningless, a relic of a dead city. He realized Khonsu was watching him, not with fear, but with an intellectual curiosity, waiting for the inevitable choice. The flanking maneuver, Naram-Sin whispered, leaning in close. Tell me the strength, and your life is spared. Khonsu laughed a dry, rasping sound. Life is already spent. Babylonian, my faith is in Amun-Ra, not your sun god. You are right, Naram-Sin said, pulling back. Your life is forfeit. I cannot break the Kanunu. Shalmaneser let out a sound of relief, reaching for his dagger to fulfill the mandate. Wait, Naram-Sin ordered, his hand held out, stopping the lieutenant mid-movement. His mind raced, desperately searching for a loophole, an obscure clause, a way to thread the needle of justice and necessity. The Code of Hammurabi was about specific reparations for specific transgressions, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But it also contained numerous clauses regarding the preservation of royal property and state interests. Naram-Sin looked at Khonsu, then at the map showing the advancing Egyptian army. He realized the true crime was not Khonsu's spying, but his refusal to provide intelligence essential to Babylonian survival. The law demanded justice, but the survival of the garrison was a more sacred, immediate law of command. He made a decision that broke the letter of the law, but upheld the highest duty of a commander. Shalmaneser, he said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. The law demands his execution. Yes, Commander. However, Naram-Sin continued, his eyes locked on the Egyptian. The law also states that any property belonging to the crown that yields critical value must be safeguarded. Khonsu frowned, finally looking confused. You are no longer a spy, Khonsu, Naram-Sin declared. You are a piece of state property, tool. And until I have extracted its use, I cannot destroy it. Shalmaneser stared, bewildered. Property, Commander. This man is a prisoner of war. He is vital intelligence, Naram-Sin asserted. And vital intelligence is Babylonian property. We do not destroy our assets without gaining their value first. It was an appalling legalistic manipulation, a blasphemy against the spirit of the ancient code. But it worked. The code did not specify when the sentence must be carried out, only that it must be carried out. Naram-Sin had secured the delay he needed, transforming the Egyptian from a doomed man into an indispensable object. He commanded his most skilled tormentor not to inflict pain, but to keep Khonsu awake, hungry, and perpetually reminded of his eventual fate. The fear of future execution, deferred but certain, was often a greater weapon than immediate torture. Naram-Sin left the cellar and immediately deployed his forces based on the scout's vague intelligence. He now had mere hours to draw the vital information from the man whose life he had temporarily spared by declaring him property. He had bent the straight line of his father's law, and the bend felt like a sharp crack in his own spine. But as commander, his duty was to the living, to the 50 men who trusted his judgment. He returned to the cellar an hour later, the dust of the skirmish still heavy in his nostrils. Khonsu, deprived of rest, finally broke, not out of fear of pain, but out of frustration with Naram-Sin's cold, calculated logic. He revealed the Egyptian forces' exact timing and the subtle weakness in their vanguard formation. Naram-Sin had the crucial intelligence. He had saved his garrison. The code of Hammurabi was upheld in spirit if desecrated in letter. He used the information to reposition his forces, turning the narrow gorge into a deadly killing zone. The ensuing battle was a Babylonian triumph, a crushing defeat for the unsuspecting Egyptians. The garrison was saved, and the Euphrates supply route remained secure. Returning to the fort, Naram-Sin went to the cellar. Khonsu was waiting, now calm and resigned. "You won, Babylonian," Khonsu conceded. "You found the weakest point in my silence and in your law." Naram-Sin nodded solemnly. "Execution will proceed now. The property has yielded its value." He had earned the lives of his men, but he had lost the innocence of the law, forever tainted by the necessary corruption of command. The Code of Hammurabi, written in stone, proved that even the strictest law could be twisted by the necessities of survival and war. Naram-Sin stood before his men, his victory absolute, his conscience forever bearing the weight of his calculated moral transgression. Thank you for watching this story until the end. Like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio.